So, hello and welcome to everyone. I'm very glad and proud to see you all at this, our second Stockholm Center of Eastern European Studies webinar on a very timely and important topic. And it's an honor to have planned to arrange this webinar in cooperation with the very active embassies of Georgia and Lithuania in Stockholm. My name is Fredrik Löfqvist, and I assumed the position as director, the first director of the new Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies on March 15th this year. I have a background at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs since 1994 and served as Sweden's ambassador to the OSCE 2012 to 17. And I was Sweden's first ambassador for countering hybrid threats 2018 to 21. And I'm personally very glad to do this in cooperation with Georgia and Lithuania, since Lithuania was my first diplomatic post in 94 to 97. And I also served as an ambassador, special envoy for the Swedish EU presidency in Georgia 2009. So these countries have a very warm place in my heart. Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies is an independent center that provides policy relevant analysis and provides a platform for meetings and discussions on Russia and the 6 Eastern Partnership countries. The center is established through a Swedish government decision last year and is fully financed by the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and the center is based at the Swedish Institute for International Affairs. It's now high time to take stock of the results of the Eastern Partnership so far. Has the potential and the original aspiration and ambition of the Eastern Partnership been fulfilled? Has the EU delivered on its promises? And have the Eastern Partnership countries been able to make full use of all the possibilities of the Eastern Partnership, especially political association and deep and comprehensive free trade? Has there been enough soul searching and self-critical analysis both on the EU side and on the Eastern Partnership countries side? Looking forward, how can a vision of EU's and more broadly the West's policy towards the Eastern European neighborhood be formulated? What should that vision be? And what is politically feasible? Where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years' time? And how important is the re-emerging transatlantic link with the Biden administration in this field? And how can security aspects better be included in future policies? Is a common Eastern European partnership framework still the most suitable format for these 6 countries, where there is, for the time being, more divergence than convergence? And what should the EU role towards the protracted conflicts be? How is our Eastern Partnership policy related to our Russia policy? Lastly, a couple of words on security deficit of the Eastern neighborhood. I think it's obvious to everyone that we have a security deficit here. This is the elephant in the room, and it concerns not only the countries themselves, but very much also the EU countries and the European security order based on the OSCE principles from Helsinki and Paris. A failure to address these issues will come at a cost for us all. Is the EU willing and able to step up? Today's webinar the idea is that this will be a first in a series of events and kick off a project at the Stockholm Center of Eastern European Studies leading up to the Eastern Partnership Summit, which will be sometime this coming autumn. Our idea is that an ambition that we will produce a policy paper or a series of policy papers ahead of the summit, feeding in some ideas and recommendations on the future of our policy towards the Eastern neighborhood, be it within the framework of the Eastern Partnership or in a broader political context. So my hope for today's discussion is not only that we have a good and nice analysis, but also that we can come up with some and identify concrete ideas and policy recommendations for the future. And we have a stellar panel here with 4 speakers and 2 discussants. First, Kenneth Foshlond, who is chair of the Committee of the Foreign Affairs at the Swedish Parliament, Riksdag, and a member of Parliament. Then we have Maka Bochorishvili, who was elected member of the Parliament of Georgia in December 2020, and she currently serves as chair of the EU Integration Committee of the Georgian Parliament, and very actively so. And she is also happens to be an old good diplomatic colleague and friend from Vienna. Next, we have Linas Linkevičius, who has been most things in Lithuanian politics and currently serves as a special envoy for the Eastern Partnership of the Lithuanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he was the foreign minister of Lithuania 2012 to 2020. Lastly, among the speakers, we have Nico Popescu, director of the Wider Europe program at the European Council of Foreign Relations, and where he works from the Paris office. And he was also briefly the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Moldova. And for our two discussants, we have Anna Westerholm, the Swedish ambassador for the Eastern Partnership at the Swedish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and Hans-Jürgen Heimsöth, who is a special representative for the Eastern Partnership at the German Federal Foreign Office in Germany, and previously Germany's ambassador to Stockholm. Some housekeeping rules. This event is on Zoom, but it's also live streamed at Facebook, and you will also be able to watch it afterwards on Facebook and on the UI homepage. Please ask your questions and provide comments, which should be short and concise, using the Q&A function for those who are in the Zoom meeting. And you will find the Q&A function in the bar at the bottom of your screen. And those for Facebook, you will send in your questions and they will be forwarded to me. When you ask a question or provide your comments, please state your full name and also any possible affiliation, and please short and concise. So without further ado, I now give the floor to Kenneth G. Foshlond, Chairman of the Swedish Parliament's Committee for Foreign Affairs. Please, Kent, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Fredrik Löjdqvist, for that introduction. You all have to pardon me for the rather dark and gloomy picture from my room. I'm sitting in front of a window, a huge one, so it should be a bright picture. But probably the camera in my computer is starting to get worn out after more than a year of COVID and all these video conferences. There is a new computer waiting for me, I'm told, but I haven't had the time to change for it. It's a little bit of a procedure to do that. Very nice to be here. You should all know that there is a very broad support for the Eastern Partnership here in the Swedish Parliament, Sveriges riksdag. And this support goes straight across the traditional political bloc boundaries that we have in Sweden between center-right parties and left-wing parties. We all have very high hopes and demands for the Eastern Partnership work. And therefore, I'm somewhat personally, in some ways, a little bit disappointed because I think that we could and should achieve so much more in this framework. And I'm not disappointed in the partnership countries. I'm disappointed in my own country and other member countries of the European Union, because I think that we all and our governments should be more active. This partnership is as important to the European Union as it is to the partnership countries. It goes both ways, and it should also engage both ways. And I think that to be a little bit critical of ourselves, we need to put in more effort from our side into this. We're devoted to promote development in all 6 partner countries. The values of democracy, transparency, human rights, rule of law, equality, and social and economic development, now also recovery after the aftermath of COVID-19. These values, all these values, are worth sharing with the peoples in the partnership countries. These are basic values of the European Union, and I think personally that the best way to strengthen them in the European Union is to also share them with neighboring countries, of course, closely to us geographically, but ultimately also globally in the world, because I think that the world would benefit out of these values that are guiding for the European Union. At the moment, we have a lot of critique, of course, against the Belarusian leadership, the stolen election, the repression of the people, the hijacking of an airplane, and so on. But that is not in contrast to our engagement in the Eastern Partnership. On the contrary, that critique towards the Belarusian leadership is in line with our engagement in the Eastern Partnership and the Belarusian people, because it's on their side that I stand as a Swedish MP and chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. We want to support needed reforms in all of the partnership countries, both economically and technically, reforms that creates and consolidates democracy, that fights corruption, that increases equality, that creates new job opportunities, that also contributes to a better environment and more of energy efficiency. This is, in a way, a vision, but to be honest, it's actually not just a vision, it's a necessity. This is something that has to be done. We can't really choose not to do it, because ultimately all of the survival for all of us in the world is actually depending on this. I want to see continued gradual integration with the European Union internal market. And the basis needed for that is development in the partner countries. At the same pace as there are reforms introduced and fulfilled in the partnership countries, you also strengthen the possibility to, in the future, take more and more part in the internal market within the European Union. And I think that this is really important, because wealth is also creating development, is my basic thinking. And out of common trade between us, we also create wealth between us. There is a strong activity on the a strong activity on the technical side within this work with the Eastern Partnership, with working groups and meetings between different officials of governments and agencies. But people in general probably know all too little about the Eastern Partnership and the work that is carried out. I think that even elected politicians, as myself, know too little in both the partnership countries and in the European Union member countries. And we should create more contact between people and also between elected politicians to raise the awareness and engagement in the Eastern Partnership. Because I think that it is through increased contacts in this way that we also can increase the activity and the knowledge and engagement. And I think that that is needed to be able to carry on with this work and reach the next level in the work, which I think is crucial for the development of all of Europe, not only the 6 partnership countries or only the European Union, but actually all of Europe. So with this as my introduction, I end here and are open for questions and reflections later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenneth. And as mentioned in the introduction, we will do all the questions and answers and comments at the end. And please then, for those attending this webinar, use the Q&A function on Zoom or send your questions through your Facebook view. Please, Maka, you are next.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure and honor to participate in today's discussion, which is very timely and important, as you mentioned. First of all, thank you very much, dear Frederick, my old friend, for inviting and giving me this opportunity to discuss future of Eastern Partnership with such a distinguished speakers. Same time, I wish you success and Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies and many interesting discussions ahead. Well, I will try to fit in 10 minutes and squeeze just key points for Eastern Partnership from my perspective. Well, 12 years after the launch of Eastern Partnership, I think we reached an important juncture when we have to look ahead and move forward with a new vision and strategy. Many things have changed in EU's Eastern neighborhood since 2009, and these changes are of different dimension, context, and content. And reality today in the Eastern Partnership region is much more complex than it was a decade ago, or maybe it's more correct to say that complexity of this reality is much more evident than ever before, which cannot be ignored. At some point, today's image of Eastern Partnership region may raise concerns among those who support this policy, fearing that the future of Eastern Partnership is threatened. But however, it is exactly that image that may serve as an inspiration for new openings in this framework. Well, before we discuss how we should proceed with Eastern Partnership initiative, let's have a quick look at its evolution. 2 years ago, when we celebrated its 10th anniversary of Eastern Partnership, we had the possibility and opportunity to fully assess its achievements, and I will not go into all these details and highlight key moments. Well, back in 2009, Swedish-Polish initiative led to start Eastern Partnership soon after Russia-Georgia war and occupation of Georgia regions by Russia in 2008. An ambitious agenda for Eastern neighbors followed, and leading us to embark on a path towards new and higher level of our relations with the European Union, opening up perspective for association agreements, and comprehensive free trade agreements, and visa-free travel. As a result, 3 of 6 countries signed ambitious association agreements in 2014, although the price was high, as evidenced by the blatant violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity by Russia. Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine have firmly committed themselves through association agreement and DCFTAs to advance the process of political association and economic integration with the European Union, while all 3 face violation of their territorial integrity, face Russian occupation, annexation, and increased hybrid warfare. From my own country's experience, I can tell that beside the challenges we face, Georgia has clearly demonstrated a successful track record of implementing the association agenda throughout these years. Based on the progress, what we have achieved and our overarching aspirations, the Georgian government decided to explicitly fulfill its European ambitions by preparing to file an application for EU membership by 2024. This is ambition, but logical continuation of Georgia's European integration path, which is supported by more than 80% of its population. Recently, Georgian, Moldovan, and Ukrainian foreign ministers signed a memorandum in Kiev that formally established Associated Trio, a joint effort to promote shared goals to greater integration with the European Union. While these 3 countries are seeking new possibilities to move closer to the EU together, divergent foreign and internal policies of SCEEUS cannot be disregarded. Recent development in Belarus and the South Caucasus region definitely added complexity of the common future of the Eastern Partnership. Today, we face increasing Russian presence and influence in the region, and we see firsthand how its behavior directly threatens and impacts European security. This complex picture and divergences raises a legitimate question as to whether a common Eastern Partnership framework is still suitable for 6 countries. Well, I strongly believe that keeping a common Eastern Partnership framework alive is very much in EU strategic interests. If the EU has geopolitical ambitions, then it has to engage in geopolitics in the immediate neighborhood and clearly respond to the challenges. And for a common Eastern Partnership framework to survive, however, requires keeping it attractive for all parties, especially for those who share values and aspire integration in the European Union. In order to remain successful and relevant, Eastern Partnership should better adapt the new realities and needs of partner countries. And now we can argue to what is feasible for the moment from different perspectives, discuss arguments about the EU's enlargement fatigue or geopolitical sensitivities. But we have to realize that it is now more important than ever before to develop a long-term vision for Eastern neighborhood. When we talk about long-term vision, I strongly believe that the future vision of the Eastern Partnership can't be separated from the vision of Europe's future itself. Eastern Partnership should not be turned into a wall between different EU policies, but on the contrary, it should be used for revitalizing a whole European idea. That can only be feasible by acknowledging European aspirations of associated countries, opening European perspective for them, and making sure that Article 49 is still valid for Europe. Of course, we know how difficult it is to find consensus on future enlargement-related issues among EU member states, but the whole beauty of the European Union and its strengths is always finding relevant compromises. For both associated partners and for the European Union, it is essential to set a new clear goal for future European integration in order to remain relevant in this rapidly changing environment and to respond to challenges in an effective way. For that, I think it's essential to enhance political dialogue on different levels among EU, its member states, and associated partners that would help to bring more European agenda into our politics and to consolidate efforts in fighting common challenges as well. In addition to this, we could expand the agenda of our dialogue and explore new areas of future sectoral integration, such as, for example, green economy, digital transformation, healthcare, and etc. This can be a big list. It is without question that association agreements are unique opportunities for democratic and economic transformation and bringing partners closer to the European standards and criteria. With this in mind, it is particularly important to ensure robust assistance mechanisms and tools to speed up relevant reforms and implementation of association agreements together with DCFTAs and to facilitate integration into the EU's internal market. The European Union and economic integration is an element of security as well. Although the EU is not a security alliance, while in most previous cases of enlargement, as well as in Balkan case, NATO integration preceded EU integration. With respect to Georgia and Ukraine, NATO membership requires additional efforts to achieve. While NATO door remains open for both countries. Meanwhile, we could enhance security and defense cooperation between associated countries and the European Union, with a special focus on countering hybrid threats, strengthening EU's engagement in peaceful resolution of conflicts. While we are discussing Eastern Partnership region, we should not forget about Black Sea and focus on full exploitation of its potential to turn it into a connecting sea. Much can be done in order to enhance physical connectivity across Black Sea and to create better links between EU and relevant Eastern partners. To conclude, I would emphasize that EU's approach to the Eastern Partnership should not be limited by defining realistic goals for today if we wish to see Eastern Partnership delivering and working. While the more ambitious vision is on place, Eastern Partnership can become more transformative framework for the years to come. The EU has a powerful policy instruments available to seize, and it has to be used vis-a-vis three associated partners to create real model of successful transformation in EU's Eastern neighborhood. Eastern Partnership should remain robust but flexible to accommodate greater differentiation. That's shortly how I would see the future for Eastern Partnership. Thank you. And ready to answer questions.
Thank you, Maka, very much. And as before, we will take the questions and answers collectively after all the presentations. And now, Linas, how does all of this looks from your viewpoint in Vilnius?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, organizers, for the opportunity to take part in this discussion. We had a number of discussions on this topic lately, and frankly, I cannot say that this is a very easy task. You know, Eastern Partnership, since very beginning of existing, undergoing stress tests, basically. It was already mentioned by Maka, you know, after initiating in 2008 by Carl Bildt and Radek Sikorski, and he inaugurated immediately after war in South Caucasus. But the aiming to engage Eastern partners into the discussion, spread European values, standards, engage in economic cooperation, and that was the task. And since very beginning, it was very difficult, because one of the reasons there's misperception sometimes, and maybe lack of ability to understand that this is not just technical cooperation project, but it's definitely geopolitical. Although I can say this is not a big secret that in some European capitals it's still denied that it's geopolitical. I believe it's one of the reasons why we are sometimes not sufficiently supporting. And you asked in the beginning why we are not are we doing enough or not? So sometimes we are really not doing enough because we cannot understand there are really very different expectations. And even now, when we're looking at the 6 countries, you know, two of them, they are quite fresh after renewed military conflict. So it's needless to say how they can cooperate between each other. One is out of political dialogue at all, I mean, in Belarus, because last year in October, we decided that relations with that country will be below political level, and they need new elections. They need to release political prisoners. So again, very difficult to have any substantial, meaningful dialogue with that country. And then we have other three, those who signed the association agreement. And basically those 3 are expecting, again, from this Eastern Partnership program to get closer to European kitchen. And it's also not a secret. They would like to have European perspective. What, again, we are sometimes not able to put even on the paper clearly. Denying what is obvious in my view. It's also a mistake. It's wrong, because who can deny that these 3 countries trying to get closer to Europe, not to other continent, trying to associate politically with European Union, trying to be integrated with European single market and economy. And this is also quite obvious, but sometimes denied due to the reasons, or I don't know, these reasons better to explain for those who denying, but again, denying this geopolitical nature. So I'm saying this, that it's always a problem of expectations. And therefore, it was very wise when we agreed to apply two major principles. One of them is self-differentiation. So each country has a possibility to decide how far they would like to go, how deep they would like to go, how ambitious they are, and also principle, so self-differentiation and inclusiveness, of course, as much as possible. So these two principles to combine, sometimes one can say it's difficult, but I believe it's possible, because if you are suggesting menu of possibilities to everyone without any exception, so it's not discrimination at all, and country deciding itself how, as I said, how far, how fast, and how intensive they would like to go. And here we see some kinds of also misinterpretation among some colleagues, because they feel it could undermine the overall program. What I disagree, because of the reasons I just told. We're really trying to make sure that every and each of these participants would feel comfortable in the format. And this lowest common denominator shouldn't be the obstacle for others to get farther and to do more. And that's also very important. So therefore, I really welcome the establishment of this association trio. We're always encouraging three association countries to cooperate more, to exchange know-how, practices, try to define common priorities, and also expectations, what they would like to expect from EU policies. That's very important, because individually everyone is doing that, but that was some qualitatively new stage when they try to do now collectively. That's very important and meaningful, I believe. It's very important to do. And here we're coming to the points that, again, very difficult to agree on date of summit. As you know, it was postponed several times, and now, thanks God, probably we'll have it in December, right? So on the eve, previous months will be ministerials with Eastern partners, and also with ministerial on Eastern partnership between ministers before the summit. We're still discussing how to draft this common declaration. It's still not yet clear whether it will happen, as we all know, because it's not easy to do. But I believe we have to stay ambitious and try to do that. And definitely, it's no question. More to say, it should be fixing some advance, comparing to previous documents, declarations, summits, because we should go ahead, basically. And again, sometimes there are attempts to revisit or even to step back from previous agreed even points of our policy, which is really sad for me personally, not just for me, but especially, I believe, for the partners. So here, I'd like to say, we're really not easy situation at all. But it doesn't mean that we should not try. And so these discussions, like today and like they were before, and I hope it will be in the future, we have to really to clarify what we'd like to expect. Shortly, this is again nothing terribly new. What I will say, it's not inventing any wheel. We have to reiterate. We simply have to reiterate our acknowledgement of European aspirations of those who decided to get closer. That should be reflected in the common declaration. Also, definitely support for territorial integrity. And when we are talking about political association and economic integration, so also should be meaningful. I believe we have to define the way how to get kind of the process, and how to draft the process of integration of our partners, those who wish so, into internal European market, digital market, focusing on some important areas like green agenda, digital agenda, and there could be very meaningful positions to be reflected. So enhanced support should be to the mechanism of the integration, and here we should gain from even mechanisms and dedicating financial instrument within the NDC, for instance, to help these countries to do that. We also can expand mechanisms which proved to be right, like support group for Ukraine. It was adopted in European Council, but it's not yet spread to other two associated countries because of lack of resources. But I believe we must find resources to do that, and that would be extended expertise in helping other two, same in the way as it was done and agreed on Ukraine to provide really in-depth and expertise on how to integrate more efficiently into single market of European Union. You hinted at the beginning, security issues. I believe it's really a must. I know Nico also has interesting initiatives. He will tell himself, but it also should be done to those who wish so, to find a way how to get closer to common foreign and security. You talking to somebody? You still hear me?
I hear you, definitely.
Okay, so how to find a way to get closer to common foreign security policy. And here again, it's not abstractly set, you know, there are concrete points, concrete ideas. We really can create platforms to cooperate our partners with EU hybrid fusion cell, for instance, or also EU cyber security agency, or PESCO projects, structural defense cooperation. Now it's open for third countries. Some when appropriate, it also could be extended to the Eastern partners. And I believe they can add value to what we're doing. So again, it's upon to their decision, but this should be open for them to choose and should be part of the menu. And that's definitely meaningful part of overall political association. Then when it comes to the deliverables, I believe we should prioritize and to focus on those which would be tangible, visible, clear for the people. Same as it was with visa liberalization with the other countries. And that should be also connectivity initiatives should be well developed. And we should come back to the idea to have, as it was discussed previously, joint roaming area with European Union, for instance. That would be clearly tangible for people as really advancing in the way of rapprochement with European Union. There are really very concrete, meaningful ways how to achieve that. So in other words, saying we have to rethink our approach. We have to understand, we in European Union, first of all, that this is, as I said, not just technical tool, economic cooperation, but also a bit more. And this is nothing against our principles, nothing against agreed lines we discussed at the beginning of this program. It's definitely up to the countries to choose the way, and we have to meet the expectations. And at the same time, we should realize once again, we are living not in the perfect world. And we see that other gravity centers acting not by the rules, but some self-inflicted, so to say, standards, which are not necessarily have something to do with the democracy, principles of democracy. And I'm not calling for unfair game. I'm just calling to take into account this and to be more proactive and really help those more than we could do in the past. One of the examples, I shouldn't say lost, but it was also clearly the result of the pressure from outside the U-turn made by Armenia. And it was in 2013, they were almost ready to sign an association agreement. And after some pressure from Moscow, it's also quite well known. They made a U-turn and went towards Eurasian Union, which was their decision, let's say, a decision of their leadership. But we lost one of the countries which would be able also to be part of this, not trio, could be quartet maybe in the future, but it's not the possibility because of the pressure from outside. So that I'd like to say by this example that situation is not so calm and pressure is big and even increasing. And many of these countries, 5 out of 6 Eastern Partnership countries, they're experiencing frozen or active conflicts on their territory. Also, let's not forget, so it's a big deal. And we cannot be just observers, we really should be not working for them or intervening into the domestic affairs, but doing our part and to help in the areas where they define is important for them, but we're definitely by far doing not enough. At the same time, it shouldn't sound that others, those partners are just perfect and nothing going wrong. Of course, they know their shortcomings, I hope, and they definitely have to do more in implementing DCFTA, for instance, because there are some comments that it's not done enough and they need more. So let's wait until they accomplish DCFTA and then maybe we can think about single market. But I disagree because when we're talking about structural sectorial cooperation, it's already existing, it's possible. So we really can do in parallel and it's nothing and nothing wrong in that approach. That would define a bit advanced, so to say, approach as what I'm trying to campaign for. So this is also reflected in the joint letter of the associated partners. We asked them to come up with the common initiatives, and they did that. So let's respond properly to what they asked us for, which is, I believe, quite understandable. Otherwise, that would be very strange. So this is, again, in short, introductory remarks, and in short, that means let's be more ambitious, let's be more forward-leaning, and let's help more them, especially those who need our help.
Thank you, Linas. And now to Nico, and I think you bring a sort of a bridging or double perspective this, both with your background as a Moldovan politician, but also as one of the leading analysts and policy shapers with a pan-European perspective. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Frederick, and congratulations on your wonderfully energetic initiatives, not just today, but all of the events that you're organizing these days. They look great. And it's good to see so many friends on this call. And I hope you hear me well, but it seems like you do. I will start from this somewhat philosophical questions that you're asking, and I heard a lot of people saying, oh, the Eastern Partnership is a failure, things aren't going well, we've ended up in so many crises. And my way of looking at it is a bit different. If I look at the last decade, I see a lot of foreign policies ending up in disasters. You know, European foreign policy objectives in the Middle East, what we wanted 10 years ago, and where are we today? It's not great. Even if I look at the Balkans, of course, the Balkans are peaceful, but I think 10 years ago, people had much higher expectations about the last decade, about the speed of joining the EU, about the domestic transformations. And many of my Balkan colleagues feel stuck somewhat in the way their countries are evolving. If I look at, you know, what Russia wanted 10 years ago from Ukraine or from the South Caucasus, there are some local successes from a Russian standpoint, but I think especially Russian policy on Ukraine cannot be termed successful compared to the expectations Russia had vis-a-vis Kiev approximately 10 years ago. So my way of trying to assess on the degree to which the Eastern Partnership works or doesn't is also to realize that if I look around, I see a lot of foreign policy failures across the last decades for the United States, for China, for Turkey, for Russia, and for the European Union. And within this sea of few reassuring foreign policy news, I think the Eastern Partnership has scored reasonably well. Of course, we have the biggest tragedy of the last decade is the war in Ukraine, and I'll talk a bit about that. But if you look at the Eastern Partnership, at the objectives through which it was launched and the objectives that it announced, I think the European Union has done reasonably well in achieving them. Of course, the free trade area is one of its key objectives, the deep and comprehensive free trade area and the association agreement. And there, I think it has had a tremendous impact, especially on Ukraine and Moldova, in helping reconsolidate, survive economically, compensate the loss of their market access primarily to the Russian market. And that has had not just an economic, but a major geopolitical effect in helping Ukraine and Moldova more or less survive not just economically, but also geopolitically. And these trade reorientations and help, they do play a bigger role. Now, I didn't mention Georgia because actually, if I look at the free trade statistics and the statistics behind the exports from Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine to the European Union since 2013, when the numbers say that Moldova has managed to increase its exports to the EU by 60%, Ukraine by 20%, and Georgia by 9%. So there's place to grow when it comes to the EU-Georgia trade relationship. And of course, the same goes for Ukraine and Moldova, but Ukraine and Moldova have managed to economically get more out of DCFTA for reasons that we'll not spend time talking about. But these things are hugely important. On energy independence and energy security, things are also much better than 10 years ago. Around 2013-14, Ukraine started importing gas from the EU because of the third energy liberalization package. And of course, with Nord Stream, the situation remains difficult for Ukraine. But nonetheless, if you compare the degree of energy insecurity that Ukraine had 10 years ago, and you compare to what happens now, you'd see that Ukraine is in a much better place. And that's because and thanks partly to the Eastern Partnership, but even more so to the third energy liberalization package, which was another way that had another EU policy that had positive externalities beyond. And Moldova, since 2 years ago, has a gas pipeline to the EU. And again, Moldova is in a much better place. And of course, Georgia has this whole hydropower complex that it developed in the last more than a decade. But there are many good news which should not be underestimated. And the Eastern Partnership has been a key element of those successes. Even in terms of democratic transition, Georgia, Moldova, and Ukraine are not yet consolidated democracies. There's constant bad news coming every couple of years from each of these countries, and none of them could be termed as a consolidated success story, but none of them is a consolidated failure, especially if you compare it to the other countries in the region when it comes to political transition. Georgia, Ukraine, and Moldova are stumbling. It's difficult. There are media issues, there are political corruption issues, there are oligarchy issues, but they are pluralist, unconsolidated democracies which score reasonably well by post-Soviet standards and are not necessarily much worse, and on some issues are definitely not worse than some countries of the Balkans when it comes to political centralization or media or issues like that. So even on the political front, if I look at the last decade, again, things could be better. They can always be better, but these countries have managed to more or less muddle through in a way that has not turned them away from the road to democratic consolidation. Now, what didn't work, to my mind, is, of course, two big things. One is anti-corruption did not work. It's primarily because of the political systems of these countries. It's not something that could be blamed on the European Union, but nonetheless, the corruption levels have mostly not improved in the last decade in most of the Eastern Partnership countries, and that's something we should reflect upon for the next phase of the Eastern Partnership. And the second biggest problem that we have is, of course, related to security. And here I come to my favorite pitch and speech, but I'll make it shorter because both Linas and Anna and Hans-Jürgens and Frederick heard it so many times, but you can read about it. It's called the Eastern Partnership Security Compact. A year ago, with Pavlo Klimkin and Ekat Keshelashvili, former foreign ministers of Georgia and Ukraine, we launched this idea that we call the Eastern Partnership Security Compact, where we call on the European Union to develop security cooperation with its eastern neighbors. And here the logic is very simple. I think the Eastern Partnership until now has mostly invested in political and socio-economic issues, DCFTA, energy, civil society, media. But you cannot have consolidated democracies without a consolidated security sector. To have a consolidated democracy, you need civil society, you need media, you need clean political parties, but you cannot achieve clean political parties without a clean security sector. And that is why I think the Eastern Partnership cannot just do socioeconomic interaction and engagement and support and capacity building and achieve what it wants to achieve without starting to deal with capacity building and Europeanization of the security sectors, primarily in Moldova, Ukraine, and Georgia. If Europe wants to be a power, I don't see why the European Union is supporting and building and investing capacity building to phytosanitary agencies, but not into the security sector. These are, you cannot have a democracy that works without a functioning intelligence service, without a functioning military, without a functioning police, and without a functioning judicial sector. So the European Union has been doing small and increasingly more things, especially on police and law enforcement and prosecutors and judges, but it's still very hesitant to interact with militaries, intelligence. And the way to go is to start slowly doing that. And the other point is that everyone is doing it. Turkey supplies drones to Ukraine and will build drones. Russia has a military liaison office in an EU candidate country, in Serbia. Everyone does this. Israel has security partnerships with some Eastern Partnership states, which go into very sensitive matters. And yet, we have a European Union, mostly several member states that are very reluctant to do this. And just as we speak, Germany is in the middle of a major controversy over some openness that the co-president, co-chair of the Green Party, Habeck, made about the potential for military cooperation with Ukraine. And here, what I have to say is many EU member states actually are engaged in military cooperation with Ukraine. And it's not just Lithuania and Poland. It's also Spain is engaged in military cooperation with Ukraine. France has some military cooperation with Ukraine. So I do find that this is natural for a country like Germany to be able to engage in military cooperation with Ukraine. I also think you can do much more on this front without necessarily disrupting that complicated but nonetheless dialogue that many member states have with Russia. Look at Turkey. Turkey has a much deeper security and defense cooperation with Ukraine than most EU member states. And yet Turkey has also a much better dialogue with Moscow than most EU member states. That's something that is worth pondering upon when we look into the next phase of the Eastern Partnership. So what can be done? Lots of things. Start with revising the mandates of EU institutions. Frederick here, I hope you give me a small golden star. But I know ENISA, the EU Agency for Cybersecurity Cooperation, doesn't even have the right to engage in cooperation with third countries as part of its mandate. There can be more to be done on the EDA, European Defense Agency mandate front. So I'd almost sit down and look at how do we change the mandates of 10, 15 EU agencies to make them open to interaction with third countries in the Balkans, in the Middle East, in the Eastern Partnership. So it's almost a legal audit that could be done. On hybrid threats, here, Frederick, I'll try to pitch in a couple of small ideas, but I think there's if you are in a consolidated democracy across the Atlantic or in a Nordic country, you say hybrid threats, many people think disinformation, social media. Why? Well, because these consolidated democracies had consolidated media markets, consolidated party systems. And then what happened in recent years is that on this functioning democracy, there's an injection of foreign activities coming through social media. So there is a lot of irritation. People say, oh, wait, there are social media influence operations. Oh my God. And that becomes a big priority for, for member states, for Brussels institution. You create at least Stratcom task force. France just a couple of days ago created a unit in the 60 people strong unit in the General Secretariat for National Defense that is supposed to follow social media influence campaigns. Now, the problem in the Eastern Partnership is that this is 5% of the problem. Because there's much more activity going on the TV front, on the illegal party finance front, and many other fronts. So my call again here to the EU is that when you think and say hybrid, you should also be very aware that hybrid should not be reduced just to social media, fake news, and Facebook operations. Because in a country like Ukraine or Moldova or Georgia, this is 5 or 10% of the problem of hybrid threats. And the rest goes into military intelligence, party finance, party transparency, prosecutors, oligarchy. There's much more to hybrid threats if you stand in an Eastern Partnership country. Now another, do I have 2 minutes or 1? 2. so that I don't look too and that is why, again, it's important for the EU member states to start reflecting as to how they can do more capacity building in Eastern Europe, in the Eastern Partnership states. Of all the funding that goes into the EAP, it's very important for this funding to continuously go into trade, boosting trade capacity, the green agenda, the Green Deal, strengthening civil society, media, gender equality issues. But it's useful if some of that funding can also be allocated to boosting cooperation on the security and defense front. I will just then throw two small ideas on the green agenda, and just to dilute this and not make our conversation too militarist. But the green agenda is a major EU priority. There's a lot of funding going into that. Europe breathes the same air. So the same air is in Ukraine and Poland and France. But it's also good if we try to boost this European interest in the green agenda, not to do, I mean, the only way the world evolves and moves forward is through technocratic change. So it's very important to do all the right technocratic steps behind the green agenda. But it's also useful to do things which capture the political imagination and besides improving the air quality in the Eastern Partnership, also sells and promotes Europe and persuades the locals that the green agenda is more of a priority than opinion polls tend to say about that. And we all know that in Eastern Europe, the green priorities are less of a priority than they are in Nordic Europe, right? So I have two specific ideas. One is, it would be good if the European Union, together with other donors and local funding, could look into doing two things. For a start, in the 5 biggest cities of Ukraine, Moldova, Georgia. So you'd have 15 cities, and open electric plugs for cars. Paint them in blue with yellow stars, and if you finance 200 plugs in Kiev and 100 plugs each in Tbilisi and Chisinau, you'd get 400 plugs. You add Tel Aviv, Belts, Mariupol, Dnipro. It's going to cost a few million. For 10,000 euro a plug, with, I don't know, 20 million, you basically cover millions of Eastern Partnership citizens with car plugs. There's a way to improve quality of air, to create, that's the type of supply that creates demand, but also advertise Europe at every single street corner where you can. Co-finance it with town halls. And that would be a good advertisement for Europe, for the green agenda, and it would also improve the quality of air. And do the same, do EU co-financing of bike sharing schemes. You have the schemes across the EU. Do it again in the 5 biggest cities, which are flat, because Tbilisi probably is not as good for a bike sharing scheme as Mariupol is, but nonetheless, look where the relief allows you, paint them in blue with stars, and you'll have kind of hundreds and thousands of euro advertisements circulating through these cities every day, and advertisements for clean. And the last concrete idea, which I want to throw into the discussion, is go back to the association agreement. There is an annex in each of them, which talks about quotas for Ukrainian and Moldovan trade. From what I remember, Georgia doesn't have any quantitative restrictions. Moldova, I think, has 3, and Ukraine has much more. So I think it would be useful if the countries and the EU can sit down and abolish these quotas, come with a roadmap to abolishing the remaining quantitative restrictions on Moldovan and Ukrainian and Georgian exports. These countries have engaged into DCFTA, into applying the acquis communautaire, and the EU will not really gravely suffer if Moldova will export more peaches and Ukraine will export more grain to the EU. That would have a good potential economic effect, but with positive geopolitical and strategic stabilization effects for these countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Nico, and also thanking for reminding us that this has not been all doom and gloom, but also a number of achievements and a gold star for concrete ideas. Now we will have two discussants and hear their views from their practitioners' diplomatic perspective on both what has said, but also from their own the everyday perspective they have on this, working on also preparing the upcoming summit. I think we have heard here expectations and aspirations to do more and to do better. And it will be interesting to hear your views on this. And I also recommend all those who attend this, viewers and listeners, to prepare and send in your questions through the Q&A function if you're using the Zoom, or if you see this on Facebook via Facebook function, and the questions will be forwarded. So Anna, what do we make of all of this?
Well, thank you so much. It's not an easy task in a few minutes to respond to all the things that have been mentioned here today, because it really does cover such a broad perspective of what the Eastern Partnership is. But I'd like to start by thanking Nico for saying that at least the EU scored reasonably well with this foreign policy initiative. And I think you're quite right. I'd like to be even more, positive here and say that Eastern Partnership is most probably one of EU's, if not the most successful foreign policy initiative, then at least one of the most successful foreign policy initiatives. And it has proven, I think, so far, its transformative power. One of the things that is a testament to its success, that I think that we quite often tend to neglect, is that today we have moved from a reactive, crisis-oriented, ad hoc agenda or relationship with our partner countries to a proactive, forward-looking, long-term agenda, which is unified, inclusive, and consolidated with our partner countries. This agenda is based on EU standards, our values, as Kenneth was referring to, and EU policies. This was unthinkable 10 years ago, but it's today the starting point for the next step, now when we are looking forward. And we are today talking about Eastern Partnership countries or Eastern partners or European, our Eastern neighbors. We are never these days talking about post-Soviet countries. I mean, that's such a bygone, with some exceptions, but looking at the three associated countries for sure. So I think that is an important starting point to remember that we've actually transformed ourselves and our perception on one another, and also helped these countries modernize in such a short period of time as 10 years. And I think that partly, and I also want to pick up on what Kenneth was saying, that this is also in the EU's interest. We're not just doing this to be nice to our neighbors. This is definitely a strategic interest for the European Union. And its continued success, the partnership's continued success, is also, it's a matter of EU's credibility as a foreign policy actor. Because if we cannot maintain progress and success and a healthy relationship with our neighbors, then how will that affect our credibility as a foreign policy actor elsewhere in the world? You know, this is our neighborhood. We should be the strongest actor here. I heard Marka talking about the need to be flexible and to adapt to changing realities. And I think that is what we have done for those 10 years. And I think this is the reason why the partnership has been successful, because we first of all, we have the principle of differentiation. So each and every country has its ambitions, and we try to meet those ambitions to the extent possible. Give and take internal disagreements in the European Union, but still we have Georgia and Moldova and Ukraine with clearly ambitious goals and targets for their cooperation within the Eastern Partnership and their ambition to one day become EU members. And we have Belarus, on the other hand, with very low ambitions. So the principle of differentiation is ingrained in the partnership. And that is what gives us the possibility to keep developing this policy in a flexible manner, adapting to changing realities. I think now, looking forward, I think several of you have touched upon the importance that the Eastern Partnership is not just reduced to technical cooperation, but that we maintain and breathe life into a long-term strategic political vision. And I think absolutely this is fundamental. Now, the European Union has a political vision for itself. Partly that political vision is now to transform our economies to sustainable green economies and to have sustainable and green societies. We are embarking on a very ambitious trajectory now towards a new modern sustainable society. And here it is absolutely central that we do our utmost within the Eastern Partnership to support our partner countries, our neighbors, to join in that trajectory, join in that development. Not only because it's good for those countries, obviously, but it's a necessity for Europe, and it's a necessity for us globally, as Kenneth was mentioning. This is a global necessity. If we narrow it down to the three countries with a wish to become EU members, then I would say that this is absolutely central, that we find ways to integrate the green transition or the Green Deal more profoundly into our cooperation with the three associated countries. Because as we are now moving in this trajectory, these countries have to follow, otherwise they will be left behind. So the sooner you can join that agenda, the better, because the quicker we can move in parallel together and come closer. So this, I think, the green agenda is central when we look forward now to the next step of the Eastern Partnership. Let me see, I have...
You have 10 seconds left.
I have 10 seconds. Then let me also comment on Nico's security compact. I absolutely agree that we need to work more on comprehensive security to unpack the whole breadth of what security means. Perhaps not defense, this is not in our toolbox, but certainly within the concept of comprehensive security, there is so much more to do. And I would like to pick up on one thing that you said then, Nico, and that is anti-corruption. Because anti-corruption is not just theft. It is a matter of national security, and you were alluding to it yourself, Nico, that this is also a tool in the hybrid threat toolbox. So I think that is one of the more paramount priorities that we have. And let me just throw in at the very end, looking forward, air quality is going to be one of the targets within the new agenda. But I'm happy to come back to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hans-Jürgen, you are in Berlin, which may not be the capital of the EU, but maybe the capital of the European EU countries. Paris might have an argument with that. But there are, as was mentioned here, interesting discussions going on in German politics also now on this. So what do you take away from this?
Well, first, Frederick, let me thank you for inviting me, and I wish the Centrum für Osteuropa-Studien all the best and gratis to your nomination. I will not dwell too long on the questions where we stand. Has EU delivered on its proposals? Nico has spoken on that, Maka has spoken on that. We know where we stand. Several glasses are more than half empty. Some are more than half full. And I think the policy we have to follow is the policy we have followed so far, more for more. So we will not wait for the empty glasses to go ahead to find solutions of going ahead and developing policies with those who have developed policies which bring them closer and closer to the EU. One word, I do want to take one word on this question of geopolitical projects. The EU, the Eastern Partnership was not conceived as a geopolitical project, but a project in line with European EU's values and principles, that every country can choose its own way, its own future, and that the EU will support the country which wish to reform and also further come closer to the EU. This is a policy EU has also in other regions of the world, Northern Africa. So if the EU sees the Eastern Partnership as a geopolitical project, this is due to the fact that it has a policy of spheres of influence and it doesn't support the right of nations to define their future. The EU stands for this right, so we here have a systemic problem and it will persist. Now we have heard a number of views and proposals, what could be done for the summit. I concur with a lot of what was said. But let me just underline one basic principle, one basic point. Even though the question of security is also of prime importance, I do want to underline that defending and strengthening the resilience of the Eastern Partnership countries is, in my view, the prime and first important way forward. This means economic development, rule of law, strong civil society, independent media. This will be crucial for wearing off Russian tentatives of influence, interference, manipulation. And this is also why it remains important to not abate on demand for consequent reforms of rule of law and combating corruption and upholding the principle of democracy. Now to coming to some future steps. And here I will mainly refer to the three associated countries of the EU. With the others, we will have to see how things go in Nagorno-Karabakh, help Armenia and so. But I think it is time really to focus a bit more on the three associated countries. We see the closer cooperation they have started generally positively. They have demanded enhanced cooperation. And here, of course, the question is what can we do? We need a more flexible format. And I think we should demand the EEAS to have a stock taking exercise that identifies and analyzes concrete demands and possible measures, both in the framework of the DCFTA and beyond. And here we should build a roadmap with milestones and expectations and requirements for additional integrative steps for the three countries. I think integration is really an important word on which we should build in the next years. And these things might sound, and they are technical, but they are also steps which bring us ahead. There are lots of projects which have been started by the Commission, Justice Dashboard, and here I think these have to be stepped up. Data collection, more can be done than has been done so far. I will not, looking at the time, I will not go into detail with what Anna said on green policies, but I completely agree. I think this will be on the forefront of our policy. Another big point is capacity building of the administration. This I have seen as really a weak point Here, there are some training programs on corruption by the EU. I'm sure that more can be done and should be done. Also, and also bilaterally, we will have an autumn first expert forum for the 3 associated countries, Eastern Partnership countries, on the question of public administration, rule of law, and others. Now, coming to the broader question of security. Looking at it in the realm of what looks feasible to me in the EU framework, I really could imagine that one should strongly support strengthening capacities to counter hybrid and cyber threats, including military capabilities. I think capacities. I think this could and should be the next step in this field. Also, the EU is not so very far in cyber policies, but I think we now can go ahead towards Eastern Partnership countries. The EU has started its cyber dialogue with Ukraine in late 2020, and one could imagine more political dialogue also with others, as well as training programs in the field of incident management, analysis, and others. And it is, I think it's important also because it concurs with our ideas of values and democracy strengthening. It is really important. Another, and that's my last point, track could be facilitating participation in CSDP missions. Proposals should be concretized, concrete for this. And of course, we should prevent duplication. Here we also need close cooperation with the United States. We should not try to compete with the United States, but we should cooperate and speak with them on all what could be done. And I think all in all, it is very good that the United States are back supporting democracies in Eastern Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Hans-Jürgen. We have about 15 minutes left. I think we might not finish strictly at 14:30, but maybe use another couple of minutes. We have received a number of questions, and I suggest that I will read and merge some of them. And then we do, as the final round, give the 4 speakers the opportunity to comment and answer these questions, and also some final remarks. One question is about, or one set of questions is about other players in the field. I mean, we are not talking specifically only about the EU Eastern Partnership policy, but a broader policy of the West, so to say, to Europe's eastern neighborhood, where also countries like the UK after Brexit, and of course also the United States, have interests. Are we too inward-looking in the EU? Are we able to engage another European partner like the UK, and also the US, which also have a lot of resources and interests in this region? A second set of questions regards the involvement of broader civil society and private business. One easily gets the impression that this is about sort of a bureaucratic political state-to-state cooperation, but couldn't we do more to involve civil society and private business, and also in some high-profile visible projects? A third set of questions regards conditionality. It's the situation in some of the Eastern Partnership countries over time has not been easy, and there has been very difficult politicians to deal with. And has the EU been managing, our own standards, our own norms, our own values, or have they been compromised? And should we insist on stronger conditionality, especially when it comes to the normative issues, corruption, authoritarianism, lack of rule of law, and so forth. One fourth question regards a little bit there is a great number of citizens or people originating from the Eastern Partnership countries within the European Union. You could maybe call them a diaspora if you want so. Are they, is it possible to engage them? Are they, and there has been parallels been made to EU's relationship to the Western Balkans. And that leads me to the next, another question that we have received, whether it wouldn't make sense to sort of have a closer cooperation or not so strict divisions between the Eastern Partnership policies and the EU's policies to the countries and also countries, candidate countries in the Western Balkans. Aren't there lessons to be learned there? And finally, again, coming back to the issue of security, I listened carefully to Nico and others, and this sounds quite resilience. What Nico said amounts very much to what I understand to be sort of security sector reform and things like the EU is doing. But still, there is the bigger security elephant in the room. There's an armed conflict, war going on. We have seen a war between Armenia and Azerbaijan recently. Where is the EU in the conflict solving? These conflicts have a direct impact on EU and EU countries. And where is EU? Germany and France are involved in the Normandy 4 in Ukraine, but what's the role of the EU? This may not be something that can be included in the Eastern Partnership program, but how is there a vision, is there a possibility for the EU to become stronger involved in this harder security agenda? Because I don't think that the EU can turn a blind eye of this, and if it does, it will be to the detriment of its own security. So this is a smorgasbord of questions here, a buffet, and please reflect and answer to this in any way you like. And I suggest that we, in the sort of 10 minutes that remained to us, that we do a reverse order here. So Nico, Linas, Maka, and Kenneth, and you will then have 2 to 3 minutes each to answer any of these questions or comment on or reflections of what the others have said. So please, Nico.
Thank you, Frederick. It's a rather long menu of issues. I'll try to. On the transatlantic cooperation and agenda, there is a lot of desire and interest now to do much more in trying to reboost and refit the transatlantic link and renovate it. And you hear it in a lot of member states. And of course, the Biden administration is a much more comfortable partner. And but if you look at when it comes to security engagement in Eastern Europe with Eastern partners, I would say that countries like, of course, the US, but also the UK and Canada have been doing quite a lot in covering up and helping and playing a synergetic role to the European Union member states' objectives on this front. The UK is far ahead in what it is willing to do in countries like Georgia and Ukraine than most EU member states, even though it's geographically more removed. The US, of course, is known for being a strong security actor, but also Canada. One of the kind of latest things that struck me in conversation with diplomats is Canada, for example, has a pretty interesting set of projects in trying to boost the role of women in the Ukrainian security sector. So it kind of fits two dimensions of what also are European goals, right? Resilience and gender equality. Whereas the European Union feels self-constrained in being more ambitious on security, and even gender is now becoming somewhat controversial because there's a bit of a pushback in parts of Brussels and some member states that try to constrain a stronger engagement on gender issues through the Eastern Partnership. So, you know, I just discovered myself a couple of weeks ago seeing how the Canadians are going full speed into doing both security and gender balance engagement with Ukraine. Whereas on both issues inside the EU, there are nuances and obstacles that have yet to be overcome fully, if I can formulate it in this way. And to me, if we look at transatlantic cooperation, I would say that, of course, transatlantic burden sharing cannot and should not only be about the 2% of defense spending, because security goes much wider than defense spending, and security also happens, security building happens outside, also is being done through partnership with third countries. So to me, this whole security cooperation agenda needs to be done and could be done, and would serve the EU interest if it is done and well coordinated with the UK, with Canada, and with the US.
One last point, Nico.
Yeah. I'm done.
Very good.
For the next event.
Okay, thank you. Linus, please.
Yeah, thank you. So, in short, maybe a few words on these players in the field, as you hinted. I'm definitely don't think that we should compete with somebody, but we cannot ignore when this somebody is fighting not by the rules, and definitely pressing partners, blackmailing, and otherwise trying to impose their own policies. And here, this is geopolitics. You can deny that, you can remember that it was invented not for that, but this is really definitely true. And by the way, example, also this war between Armenia and Azerbaijan, when European Union or Minsk group was put aside or self-isolated themselves, I don't know the reasons in details, Turkey and Russia made everything accordingly, their own priorities in that conflict region. So this is not the only example when we are looking from a side, when we are not proactive. So this is not a lack of competition, this is something else. This is passive approach. And regardless the fact that Nico put very positive marks for Eastern Partnership, I understand where you cannot deny these positive points he mentioned, but I still believe we should be far from complacency given the enthusiasm with which we're preparing this forthcoming summit and postponing many times and really lagging behind. I believe this is also something we should really look at and more responsibly. And you asked a few points just to fix as a proposals for possible deliverables. I would repeat that I believe we have to quite clearly define principle of self-differentiation. And this otherwise, I'm afraid that some of our partners will lose interest in Eastern Partnership program, because for them it's really not just a program for existence, but also a rapprochement with European Union, and they would like really to get more, and they deserve to get more. So self-differentiation. Also believe we have to intensify sectorial cooperation, especially with those who are ready and wish to do that. We have to include the security part, which was discussed during our meeting now today, and should be clearly defined in the paper. And definitely these could be concrete proposals for your possible paper as you're drafting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linus. And now to Maka.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for very interesting discussions. And well, yes, security is the biggest challenge we face, and that elephant in a room is something that we have to deal with, and we have to have a very clear policy, and that the way they play and the way they act is not acceptable, and to define how we can react and how we can respond to it. Well, as of UK and US as the players here, yes, both after Brexit, UK and United States for many years and decades play an important role in the region. I can tell from our perspective and our strategic partnership with the United States, I can call it key partner when it comes to securing our development, our economic democratic development, and our way towards European integration as well. Because when it comes values and when it comes reforms, very often we are talking about same things, and the United States or Union are supporting same development for the country which is better democratic standards and better economic situation here. So one interesting question was about Eastern Partnership countries, associated partners probably, and Balkan countries, where we stand and where we are in terms of similarities or challenges or instruments. That is something we have to look at, probably to learn from experience from Balkan countries as well, and to look at where we stand in terms of integration when it comes to associated partners. A couple of interesting studies has been done recently, and comparing associated partners and Balkan states, and which shows that very often in some cases these countries are on the same level of integration with the European Union. And of course, when it comes to instruments, what are accessible for associated partners and what are accessible for candidate countries are very much different. So that is something we have to look at once we are talking about upcoming Eastern Partnership Summit and possibilities. And here we are more or less mostly, I could say, like-minded people gathered, and we can agree on differentiation and greater differentiation. But I have heard many times in Brussels, especially some kind of fairs, when we talk about differentiation, that putting three countries together can destroy Eastern Partnership future, and that is something that we need to show and create real showcase that developing special instruments or special possibilities for these associated partners, it does not necessarily mean end of Eastern Partnership, and in contrary, it can play sort of better role for keeping this policy for European Union. So that's all, I think. And one more thing, which is people-to-people contact and more contacts between civil societies and business sector. I think that is something very important to develop and to enhance, because end of the day, these are people who create that strong links, and that's where we have to work, how we can enhance this cooperation and that partnership. And as Nico mentioned about, now mentioned numbers on free trade related numbers, and yes, developing that contacts, business contact, can bring that better economic integration and better use of the CFTA possibilities, which is provided for three associated countries for the moment. Thank you again.
Thank you, Kenneth. You will have the last word, and there's also, we haven't been able to mention all the questions, but I also note that you are basically the only speaker that mentioned another elephant in the room, and that is the current situation in Belarus and EU's relationship to Belarus. And I just read here from one one comment or question is that says that this person would not put Belarus in the category of being a country with low ambitions towards European integration. It's a country in a serious crisis and a big trouble, but with the population, a nation that is very strong and open, and that we should have an open, positive, and honest discussions about the European future for Belarus. I just added. But Kenneth, you will have the last words from our panelists here.
Thank you, and I fully agree that there are two perspectives in Belarus. I mean, it's the political leadership, or whatever to call it. They definitely don't have a European aspiration and perspective, but among the people, it's obvious that they are sharing the values that are basic to us in the European Union and in the Eastern Partnership. And we should really embrace the people of Belarus, definitely so. One of the questions was about other players, and are the European Union too much inward looking? I don't think so. I think that the European Union has a strong capacity of being open to the world. It's one of the basic functions, I think, of the European Union. But we have to be realistic about both the United Kingdom and the United States at the moment. The United Kingdom, they are in the process of Brexit. It's not finished. They have now to really implement Brexit and develop new systems on a number of areas to get the Brexit to work. And that is going to be time consuming for the United Kingdom. And we realized that or experienced that in different contacts with the United Kingdom at the moment, that they have a lot to do at the moment, and we should do the best from our side to help them out, of course. When it comes to the United States, they're definitely, so to say, back again when it comes to engagement in the world and in Europe and in the transatlantic link. But it is a different United States today than 4.5, 5 years ago. It is a more inward-looking United States. We have to realize that there are changes in the United States that is affecting the previous administration's possibilities to work and to engage in globally and with Europe. When it comes to engaging diasporas within the European Union countries, I think that is a fantastic idea. I mean, this is people that really has one foot in each country, in each part of Europe. They have the cultural competence. I mean, they of course are an extremely strong asset for all of us to develop the Eastern Partnership, and we should really do our very best to engage them in different areas of this. I think that we would get a lot for free, so to say, doing that. And when it comes to the elephant in the room in the case of wars, I think it's important, not only because of the fact that Sweden presently is the share country of the organization, but to use the OSCE. I think that the OSCE is a vital tool for European security. It should be used much more to solve different crises, and not only when Sweden has the chairmanship, but always this should be the vital tool, I think. And as a bonus, perhaps answering questions, when it comes to involving private businesses more, that is, of course, a very good idea. And I have to say that I really love Nico's idea about these bicycle pools. And that is probably a perfect area to also engage private companies in setting up those, because I mean, I see really the cities in front of me with all these blue and yellow bikes. I really love that idea. Thank you, Nico. And thank you all for taking part today.
Thank you to all the speakers and discussants of today's discussion in this, and I think we had a very rich discussion and a lot of things were mentioned. There were a lot of things that we didn't have time to talk about, and we didn't also have possibility to answer all the questions. Our hope and ambition is to get back with further seminars and brainstorming discussions after the summer break, and also coming up with some bright visionary ideas for the future in autumn at the center. And a big round of a virtual applause to our speakers and discussants today. I will also like to especially mention the center coordinator manager Hedvig Pettersson, without whose help this would not have been able today. And thank you all in the audience for staying on, and please note that you can watch this event on Facebook and on UI homepage in due time. We have now almost drawn over 10 minutes, but I think this is just a proof of how interesting and relevant this discussion again. So again, thank you very much from us in Stockholm at the Stockholm Center for Eastern European Studies for participating today.